Hey, party people. Welcome to the first installment of my new series, Black Contributions to Fashion History. And we're going to start by discussing Black fashion designer Ann Lowe. Spoiler alert, she designed and created Jacqueline Bouvier's wedding gown when she married John F. Kennedy, then Senator, future president. Despite people being obsessed with Jackie O's personal style, people don't really know much about Ann Lowe at all. We're going to change that. So let's rewind. Ann Lowe's maternal grandmother was an enslaved seamstress. Okay, her skills were of a notable professional level, and her grandmother's freedom was bought by her husband, who was at the time a free Black carpenter. Ann Lowe's mother also became a seamstress. And so grandmother and mother, they were gifted, they were skilled, and they built a business making dresses for Alabama's richest white families. Okay? Black women of the 19th century were not formally trained. They learned in the home. And Lowe herself was taught to sew when she was 5 years old by her mother and grandmother. And she learned and she grew a particular skill set in making fabric flowers. That was kind of her thing, even from early days. And you'll see that theme throughout her career, her magic with beautiful fabric flowers. There's a story that a dress was returned to her after a debutante ball because the girl's date had snipped a beautiful carnation from the dress as a memento. And I want to know, what kind of rude or blind moron is going around snipping flowers off of girls' dresses? Okay, like, did he really think it was a real flower? And he's just like, I'm going to take this flower. Oh, no, it's okay. I'm getting sidetracked, but that story is just nuts. For various reasons, the exact dates of her early years are up for some debate. Records weren't great back then. And those records include the year of her birth. Okay, we think she was born in 1898 in Alabama. You know, Lowe herself was a bit of an unreliable narrator, and that, I posit, is because she wasn't recognized and she didn't start getting requests for interviews about her life until she was already well in her late 60s. But generally speaking, Ann Lowe was born in 1898 in Alabama. And in 1912, Lowe married and had a son. In 1914, her mother unexpectedly passed away. Lowe finished up the gowns her mother had been working on, including one for the First Lady of Alabama, and with the completion of those gowns, really established herself as a skilled dressmaker in her own right. When Lowe married, her husband wanted her to give up her career as a seamstress and become a stay-at-home mom, and she did for a while, and she only sewed outfits for herself, but people would literally stop her on the street and ask her about her clothes. In 1916, Lowe was offered a really sweet gig in Tampa, Florida. Her husband didn't want her to go, so she packed up just herself and her son and her scissors and took off. Boy, bye. Lowe became the live-in seamstress for an affluent Florida family, the Lees, who had 4 daughters. That's a lot of gowns, okay? Her first project was to create identical wedding gowns, dresses for the entire bridal party, and bridal trousseaux for the twin daughters' double wedding to a pair of brothers. Someone please make this movie and hire me as the costume designer. So while still working for the Lees in Florida, Lowe went on to train at a design school in New York with the Lees' blessing and financial support. She was the only Black student there at the St. Taylor School of Design in New York City. She was barely admitted. There are rumors that she was overcharged because she was Black. And she was segregated from the other students. She was in a separate classroom all the time. Except, she was so good, she finished the program in half the time. It was a 1-year program, but at 6 months, the director told her there was nothing left to teach her. So she went back to Tampa, moved back in with the Lees, and continued to make dresses for the family. She had always had outside commission work from rich Tampa folk, and those commissions again kept rolling in. In 1920, she got married again, moved to her own house, and continued to sew for the Lees and other Tampa folk, becoming really well known for her bridal work. She needed more help to do all the painstaking hand stitching required to bead and embroider evening gowns. So she tried hiring people, but she couldn't find skilled people. So she started teaching classes to train people herself. She set up a workroom behind her home and called it Annie Cone, which was her first married name. And she used it for a while, even though she was divorced and remarried. That whole unreliable narrator thing again. Okay. So Annie Cone, the workshop, is thought to have been a launching pad for a number of Tampa's African American seamstresses. Okay. So she was training women, they were working for her. Lowe didn't work from patterns, but she did keep a record of client measurements, and clients would come in the night of the event. No question that everything would fit, get dressed at the shop, and then just take off for the event. Like, amazing. That's skill. That's beautiful. While demand for her skills grew in Tampa, she still ran into several business blockades caused by segregation and discriminatory laws. So in 1928, she closed the workshop and moved permanently to New York. She continued to remember the society ladies of Tampa fondly, even well into her 60s. So in 1928, when Lowe moved to New York, the kind of idea of the American fashion designer was kind of unknown, unsteady. American society took their cues and their dresses from the French. American ready-to-wear was thriving, but American couture was still an evolving amoeba. Okay? And it was pretty much Ann Lowe and Jessie Franklin Turner, this white woman originally from St. Louis. I only mention she's white to let you know she won't be featured in this series. But you should check out her work. It's beautiful. Anyway, the point is everyone else was copying the French except these two ladies. Setting up shop in expensive New York without a Rolodex of ready clientele just before the crash and the Great Depression was just as lucrative as it sounds. Okay, her Tampa clients, those families, they got rich off citrus. They call them the citrus executives or something like that. And they did not fare as poorly as New York families and would actually still come up to New York to order dresses from Lowe. And that wasn't quite enough. So Lowe took to designing and making dresses private label on commission for other design houses. And so she was able to stay afloat through the Great Depression this way. Lowe spent most of her life living in Harlem, like other early Black fashion designers. Her contemporaries were Ruby Bailey, who was known for Afrocentric style before anyone really knew what that meant, and Zelda Wynne Valdez, who designed for musical and stage performers like Ella Fitzgerald, Eartha Kitt, and Josephine Baker. But Lowe preferred to design for the old money Upper East Side New Yorkers, which is also where she had her studio. People say all the time, it's who you know, but the most successful combo is actually having the right skill set coupled with knowing the right people. In Lowe's case, a New York socialite named Polly Bush was her introduction to the most socially prominent families of the city. Lowe added a new specialty to her business, the debut gown. Okay, debutantes apparently needed a whole new wardrobe for their debut, so that is a whole lot of work for a premier dressmaker like Lowe. Lowe herself says she only designed for elite families like the DuPonts, the Roosevelts, the Astors. Her style was called fairy tale gowns, which was perfect for the debutantes she served for their quote-unquote fairy tale moments. In a quote from Lowe herself, she says, "I love my clothes, and I'm particular about who wears them. I'm not interested in sewing for Cafe Society or social climbers. I do not cater to Mary and Sue. I sew for the families of the social register." Talk about nailing a specific customer profile. Am I right? In 1942, Lowe and her second husband divorced because he didn't want to be married to someone, quote, who was forever jumping out of bed to sketch dresses. Listen, if you're jealous of her perseverance and success, just say that. In 1946, Lowe designed a hand-painted floral gown for Olivia de Havilland, which she wore to accept her Oscar for Best Actress. If you don't know who she is, Olivia de Havilland played the annoying Melanie in Gone with the Wind. Yeah, she was a celebrated actress, with lots of awards and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, however, this project was one of her private label projects, so the gown is actually credited to a Sonia Rosenberg, which sucks to have like this great gown in the public eye, but not have credit for it. Lowe finally did get a lovely credit in Vogue 8 years later as the designer of Nina Auchincloss's debut gown. In 1947, Lowe designed debut gowns for the Bouvier sisters, Jacqueline and Lee. So in this way, Lowe survived the Depression and the supply shortages during World War II, which honestly, huge kudos, not every designer, every shop, every business, every dressmaker did. And while Lowe wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, so many of those girls who wore Ann Lowe debut gowns returned for their Ann Lowe wedding gowns, and so Ann opened a shop on Madison Avenue. Her business partner was one Gracie Stelly, a society matron, a former customer, and the wife of the owner of Stelly Silks. In 1953, Lowe designed and made Jacqueline Kennedy's wedding gown, but she wasn't publicly recognized. The closest she got was from the Boston Daily Globe, who said the gowns came from a New York dressmaker who had been Jacqueline Bouvier's mother's dressmaker for several years. So if you wanted to track her down, you could. But yeah, that's still not the same as getting credit for it. Fun fact, a flood ruined the first gown. She had to make it all over again in 2 weeks, and Lowe actually ended up losing money out of the deal. Fun fact number 2, tensions rose over this gown project to a level where Lowe and Stelly severed their partnership. Listen, has anyone made a movie about how everything Jackie O touches turns to ash? Christina Onassis said she was cursed, and I think she was right. Someone please make this movie. Lowe set out on her own, and her son Arthur joined her and kept her books and ordered her materials. The early 50s were kind of the beginning, the dawn of the golden era of her career. Her business created 1,000 gowns a year with a staff of 35 and grossed $300,000 annually. In today's money, that would be almost $4 million US dollars a year. A Black woman in the 50s with an 8th grade education, leading a business with 35 staff, $4 million a year. That's nuts. Listen, I love the slow and steady wins the race success stories. I love it. I love it. Lowe also sold through top department stores like Neiman Marcus and I. Magnin, which took her work to California. She added wholesale designs to her business by the mid-1950s. The New York Times would occasionally quote her as an expert on debutante style. A big newspaper quoting a Black woman as an expert on something in the 50s? That's nuts. Lowe's luck changed drastically in 1958. Lowe's son Arthur was killed in a car accident, and it seems that Lowe didn't hire anyone to look over the financials after Arthur's death. The business side had never been Lowe's strength. On top of that, glaucoma was advancing in her right eye. Lowe closed shop in 1960, owing thousands in back taxes and overdue purchase orders. So in comes Saks Fifth Avenue, swooping in to save the day. Except not really, okay? So they decided to partner with Lowe as the head designer for an exclusive boutique inside Saks for debut and bridal gowns. But the contract was heavily skewed in Saks' favor, and long story short, Lowe had to file for bankruptcy in 1963. A pattern throughout Lowe's career is that she often undercharged for her dresses. And I know that so many of you people who do custom clothing made to order, can relate to this. So that was a problem. Some attribute her lack of business savvy to her 8th grade education in poor rural Alabama. Okay, could be it. Some say she's just like her creative peers who are equally, quote, hopeless with money, like Paul Poiret and Charles James, who both died penniless. One book, and I quote, one book called Yves Saint Laurent a financial imbecile. That's a direct quote. Don't come for me, but we all know he would have gotten nowhere in life without Pierre Berge. So Lowe had to get her right eye eventually removed because of the glaucoma. She soon got another job at a different shop, but started having problems in her left eye. And so then she had surgery. So with her eyesight restored, she opened up a shop once again in 1965, this time with a designer named Florence Cowell under the label A.F. Chantilly, and this time finally pricing her gowns correctly. Listen, you cannot keep this woman down. Are you kidding me? How many times has she started up again? She is incredible. Her face is in the dictionary next to the word resilient. She lost an eye. She kept working, started losing vision in the other eye, had surgery, continued to keep working, and she kept working, making beautiful debutante gowns until she finally fully retired in 1972, which would make her approximately 74 years old. Looking across her work, markers of Lowe's style includes often an hourglass silhouette, heavily leaning towards structured silks. Floral appliques were her specialty, of course, especially on sleeves and skirt accents. She loved a wide bateau neckline. And on the inside, she had built-in petticoats, laced finished seams, lace-bound seams, hems reinforced with gathered tulle, a very distinctive Ann Lowe bodice construction with a built-in long line bra. Lowe is viewed by many as one of the last Black American designers whose skill and career can be directly and positively traced back to the era of slavery. With the catalog of work I just rolled out, she should be up there for wide recognition on par with, say, like a Norman Hartnell. Hartnell is best known for dressing the British royal family, and Ann Lowe basically dressed American royalty. Let me know if there are any particular Black designers that you would like to learn about in this series. Drop me your questions, drop me your video requests, give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today, if you have now become a new Ann Lowe fan, and I will see you in the next video.